and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. In the studio here with Scott Bryant again today. We don't have a guest this week, but we do have a lot of information to cover. Obviously, with all the things that are going on, I guess it'd probably be pertinent to start with the current status of COVID and the tiers that we're in. Obviously, today we're still in the purple tier, but there is some hope. I read the reports from yesterday, and we're down to about 19,000 cases, I think it was. So that's substantially less. It's not just a couple of weeks ago. We we're at almost approaching 70,000 cases in one day. So 19,000 puts us in a pretty, much better situation. I think once we get down to 10,000 or less, it should give us an opportunity to do some things. The Sac Joaquin section had already decided to cancel playoffs. In lieu of playoffs, they were going to initiate maybe a bowl game for schools that were allowed to play. The benefit of that is it backs up the ability to start the season much later, because you have 4 or 5 weeks of playoffs that were removed. And basically all the other sections in California are now falling in line. So the southern section actually jumped on that as well this week and stop playoffs. So, and then there's some talks about the last day of playing football for the spring would potentially be May 1st or on or about May 1st. So that actually gives some hope to being able to start a season mid-March. So you'd be able to start football, volleyball, those types of sports, the winter sports or fall sports, and possibly the winter sports basketball. We'd start practice. It would start late February with games starting mid-March. So, not that everything's all doom and gloom, but not that everything's all roses, all rose petals and sunshine either. We're kind of in a holding pattern. Monday is an important date for the CIF, as they will have another announcement as far as where things stand and where we're going with things. I anticipate that things will be punted again. They'll basically push to a couple of weeks into February, and that will be probably one of the final dates for them to be able to do anything. The beauty of, I think, all of this is the coalitions and the alliances that are being formed. I'm actually part of one of them. It's the Golden State Coaches Alliance or Association, and basically it's a group that was formed to put all the coaches in a central area so we could share ideas. It'll be beneficial in the long run for us to help with scheduling and any new rulings that we'd like to get pushed along and things like that. So it's, sometimes in the storm, things are developed, and good things come out of it. So hopefully this will bring us much closer together. Scott has some factual information as far as the Coaches Coalition put together, the Golden State coaches put together some data, and Scott will kind of go through that at this point.
Yeah, I just think that coalition has done an outstanding job of keeping all the information current and keeping people in the know. I think even more so than the CIF, because they're really motivated to get kids back out on the field. But as of actually today, the most recent information, here's some statistics that they've provided for us. So 815,313 athletes play CIF sports. Over 2 million student athletes play youth sports. Close to 3 million student athletes have been on the bench since March 10th of 2020. Specifically working towards some of the football numbers, on a study of 21,370 athletes, of these athletes, there were 567 reports of COVID. That's less than 3%. 11 total positive cases attributed to the workouts conducted on school campuses. So of 21,000 and some change, 11 athletes tested positive as a direct result of on-campus workouts. Over 1 million workouts. Athletes arrived and left campus workouts COVID-free over 1 million times. The rate of transmission from workouts was 1 in 91,756. 3,140 coaches. Of these coaches, there were 205 reports of COVID. That's 6.5%. 2 positive cases attributed to the workouts conducted on high school campuses. 140,564 workouts. Coaches arrived and left school campuses COVID-free 140,562 times. The rate of transmission for the coaches from workouts was 1 in 70,282. So, when you look at these statistics, and again, I want to be perfectly clear. I think Chris, you and I are 100% on board on the effects of this this terrible disease and the importance of following the guidelines that are set forth. I think we all 100% are on board with that. If they tell us to mask up, we mask up. Stay 6 feet, we stay 6 feet. You can't attend this, don't attend that. But, the coalition has done an outstanding job of compiling this information and really have made a compelling argument of why we should be able to move forward, more so than when you look at the states, the rest of the states in the United States that are open and having football. I would argue that our numbers are even better than those states that have been doing all of this.
Yeah. So I was actually a part of this survey. It's conducted. There was, again, bringing up how coalitions are formed and alliances are being formed through this pandemic and the struggles that we're going through. The coaches are uniting, and so and the honesty is important. You talk about out of 3,000 coaches, 205 people actually reported that they'd actually got COVID, with only 2 of them coming from actual practices or within the team. Right. I was one of the 205. I wasn't one of the 2, but I was one of the 205. I answered it honestly. I got COVID. I mean, it was awful. It was difficult, and but it wasn't debilitating. It wasn't something that now that we're back conditioning and things like that, it kind of puts things into perspective. We are down to 25 kids right now, and the motivation isn't there because they don't feel like we're going to play, and so it's hard to get kids that are 15 to 18 years old to think past tomorrow, much less think about 5-6 weeks from now. So as a part of the coalition, or part of these studies, there were some national high school football COVID data compiled. 34 states successfully played their season. 94% of the states who started football played through the championship games. 94% of the 34 states. And
I didn't mean to cut you off there, but when you look at some of these states, it's not like, we're not saying that they went, free of any issues. There were issues, but the way that they handled them were great. They had a plan. They moved forward with the plan, and the contingencies that they had set forth in the event that something were to happen, they employed those and were still able to get to an end result of having a championship. Sure. And so they've proven it can be done.
Yeah, 96.3% of the Texas State champion finalists missed just 12 of 320 scheduled games this season.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, it's not like you said, it's not like everybody's just going, oh, we're just going to play through it and deal, no, if you get it, so what? Mm-hmm. I mean, they're actually shutting it down, putting kids on the sidelines, keeping them quarantined and isolated so they're not spreading it to each other. 910 games were scheduled to play football in Arizona. Of those 910, 857 actually happened. So 95% of the scheduled games actually happened. So are there cancellations? Sure. 5,000 student athletes tested negative for COVID in the Michigan study. So 99.6% tested negative. 30 states have already started their basketball season. And there's only 7 states, including California, that haven't had any athletics since this has happened.
And you go back to those numbers where you're talking about, 95% of the games occurred because there were cancellations in there. If you look at a normal school year, there are game cancellations anyway. So they're not trying to hide behind any numbers. They're including that as well in this. So, I would imagine we could come up every year with a percentage of of games that are canceled for one reason or another, whether it's lack of participation, maybe it's a traumatic event at a school, or, there's a whole litany of reasons. But, the fact of the matter is this, in those states where they set forth a plan, followed the plan, and adhered to any contingencies that they had. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth repeating. They were successful. And, for me, and you've heard me say this several times on this podcast, for me, one of the biggest things, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, because we've got a letter that was penned to the governor that we'll review here in a few minutes. But to me, one of the biggest aspects of this, and we focus on athletics, but it's the mental well-being of our high school age and our youth sports athletes. It really does boil down to that, because we're cognizant of the fact that, bands aren't able, the high school bands aren't able to get together. The high school,
drama
FFA.
Club,
and these are all important things that I think, while they don't fall under really what we're focusing on this podcast, they're all equally as important. And those students are not getting, they're not getting the opportunity to do the things that they're passionate about either.
Well, and I think that, we're not, as humans and the way that we've evolved, we're not meant to sit in isolation. Everything that we do on a daily basis shapes us and rounds us into the people we become. Right, wrong, or indifferent, bad or good, everything, all of our experiences make us who we are today. And so when you take a kid and force them into isolation for what's approaching now a year, where they're stuck, not having a physical exertion, not being able to socialize other than being on, social media or texting or FaceTime or what have you. There's a lot to be said for that physical personal interaction. There's a lot of studies associated with teenage suicide that are related to the evolution of social media. And it's not that the negative or the bullying or anything like that. It's that kids lose that social interaction and, don't have the physical, like a hug or a smile or somebody to see on face to face, telling them they love them and things like that. So there's becomes this disassociation with reality, and so all of those things, FFA, drama, band, obviously athletics, home ec. I think it's called something different now. So Miss Neely, please don't beat me up about it. But
but even beyond that, just like you said, the opportunity to gather at your high school campus, and maybe this is giving us all a reality check and how much we took it for granted, that the importance of the social aspect of being on a high school campus where we're sitting in a classroom, the kids are they're taking their classes, but then when the bell rings and they go out and they've got a 15-20 minute break, able to talk to friends that they're actually talking to them and not texting them, and they're not calling them on the cell phone, and they're not FaceTiming them. They're actually physically getting that opportunity. And there's such a human element that has been removed from society today because of that. And I'm not a doctor, but I imagine that there's some mental health damage that's occurring by eliminating that. And I can tell you too, as a father of a high school student, this is not a dig on the high school teachers by any means, because I think they're kind of behind the eight ball too. But the instruction has, in my opinion, has decreased severely. And this is not anything against the teachers. I think they're doing the best that they can do, but I think they would probably all agree that they're most effective when they're able to be in front of their students.
Well, think about, as you and I as coaches, I mean, how much, when we would speak to an athlete, you're coaching up an athlete, you're teaching them a drill, you're teaching them, what their expectation is, and you can look at that person in the eye and you can tell if they're lost or not.
Right.
That's where Zoom falls on deaf ears a little bit, that it's,
sure.
And it again, like you said, it's not the teacher's issue. It's the world we're living in today. But yeah, I mean, think about how many times you text somebody and how much of that text gets lost in translation,
Right.
where you meant one thing and somebody else reads it a
Exactly.
complete different way.
Exactly.
And so these kids are they're just growing up in an environment that's just not conducive to being well-rounded, to being healthy mentally and physically, emotionally. There's so much that's hindering them, of becoming the successful people that they probably would have been.
Yeah.
And it's not that it can't be overcome. This isn't the end of the world. We're not preaching that. We're not saying that. We're just saying that there's so much being missed. And the scary part about this is, if you really think about it, so the argument has been made for the last, almost year now, that, hey, when the vaccine comes out, we're going to be okay, that we're going to get back to some normalcy and blah, blah, blah. Well, 2 days ago, I read that they don't expect the 65 and over population to be vaccinated until June 22nd. Because in California, we're the 49th rated state in vaccinations.
And it goes without saying that we've, I think, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, that we've totally screwed up the approach that we've taken to high school athletics. I think it's a train wreck. I think it's terrible. I think the CIF has done a terrible job. And again, this is my personal opinion. We've done a terrible job, but then they're also trying to go under the guidelines of what the state set forth. Okay, so let's push it uphill a little bit here. We can't even handle giving the vaccine to the people that need it. We're California. We're one of the largest producing GDPs in the world, but we're a third world country right now. And if people aren't paying attention, and this is kind of going to get away from, this is not necessarily, pointing a finger at anybody, but it's a reality. Look at what is happening in the state of California. We can't vaccinate people properly. And why did we not have a plan for this? Why was that not? Why we knew it was coming? Well, we can't vaccinate properly. But oh, by the way, we also can't take care of our forests and the wildland fires, and we can't take care of
our roads.
Yeah, our roads. We I don't know. I mean, there's probably a whole list of things that we could go down. I don't want to take myself down a wormhole where I'm not going to recover because I'll get fired up. But it kind of brings us to the next subject that we want to talk about that's occurring. And before I read a statement that was issued by the CIF, I want to get a little bit more background on this. And Chris, I know this is where you kind of understand what the ruling was earlier in the year, where they made a temporary exception to a CIF rule that basically allowed student athletes to they could participate in their high school sports, but then they were also participating in club sports. Maybe before we move on to the statement, maybe give us a little bit of background of that temporary ruling that came out.
Yeah. So when all of this started going down, I think that there were some concessions being made to allow the kids to get their normal participation in a shorter amount of time. So I would think, so the thought process, my belief is the thought process from the CIF was, look, if you are a football player and you're in football season and you want to play travel baseball on the weekends, we're good with it. We don't have a problem with that. You've already been, and especially, if you're a senior, your time has been shrunk down to X, and now we're going to allow you to do whatever you need to do to be able to get in the competition that you can get in, because, for 98% of the people in the world, after your senior year, when you graduate, your for all intents and purposes, your competitive athletic career is over. So that's my belief, is what the CIF's intent was. Now you can talk about the evolution.
Yeah. So document dated January 20th, 2021, the CIF state office issues the following notice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the document, and then we can circle back and maybe break it down a little bit. But CIF bylaws 600-605, referring to outside competition. On July 20th, 2020, pursuant to bylaw 1108, the CIF executive director issued a notice which suspended CIF bylaws 600-605 outside competition for the 2021 school year only. And this is what Chris was just talking about, the waiving that law or rule, I guess. On December 14th, 2020, the governor's office and the California Department of Public Health, the CDPH, released the updated guidance document, Outdoor and Indoor Youth Recreational Adult Sports, which included the language below. Cohorting. Outdoor and Indoor Youth and Recreational Sports, CDPH document. Athletes and coaches should cohort by team and refrain from participating with more than one team over the season or time period, notwithstanding competitions permitted as outlined below. Therefore, the CIF must rescind its temporary suspension by CIF Bylaws 600-605 outside competition effective immediately to avoid being in conflict with the language issued by the Governor's Office and the CDPH. If the CDPH guidance is amended in the future, the CIF may elect to revisit this issue. So, question. If a student has already participated on a team outside the CIF, does this impact their high school eligibility? And the answer is no. As of today, there have been no CIF contests, so no student has lost eligibility with respect to the bylaw. And then finally, financial hardship waiver, CIF Bylaw 207. On June 12, 2020, pursuant to Bylaw 1108, the CIF Executive Director issued a notice allowing for a waiver of Bylaw 207 for a student who transfers to a new school during the first semester of the 2021 school year, where when there was demonstrated and verifiable hardship condition due to financial difficulties due to the impact of COVID-19 virus. That notice also granted the CIF discretion to extend this waiver beyond the semester of 2021. Therefore, effective immediately, the application period for filing of a financial hardship due to COVID-19 is extended through the end of the 2021 school year. So, in a nutshell, what they've done is they came out and, just as Chris had described, by basically giving a one-year exemption to the bylaw, they have now rescinded that and have basically, and just to make it, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, they basically are saying that if you're a member of a team, you can only be a member of that team and no other team. And this now they're stating, the state of California, the California Department of Public Health is basically saying they don't care if you're a high school athlete, a youth sports athlete, or an adult athlete. You can only cohort with one team. Maybe I'll refrain from my opinion until you might have something to say along.
No,
with this.
I mean, I think we've mentioned this off air. You know, it's overstepping. I mean, it's and the reality of where it is that cohorts are not just affiliated with sports. I mean, you have, you know, people belong to churches. You know, you have kids that are going to, you know, some schools are starting to return to in-person instruction. You know, you have, you know, again, we mentioned drama and band and all those types of things. So if you're in drama, you can't play a sport. If you're in band, you can't play a sport. If you go to church, you can't play a sport because they're different cohorts.
Yeah, that's right. It's if you don't have a problem with this and you think it's in the best interest of us as humans, I'm sorry, you don't get it. You don't get it. This is a passive aggressive move by our state government to control more aspects of what we do. So to put it in perspective to what Chris just said, let's say you're part of a youth group at your local church and you go there every Wednesday from 7 to 9 and you guys, you know, get together and you adhere to the rules. You stay outside, you put on masks, you do all those things. Well, that eliminates you from playing on a neighborhood softball team because you can't cohort two different groups, you know, and maybe we're oversimplifying it, but just even if that's remotely the nature of what they're saying here, this let's turn the clock back and move everybody to Nazi Germany, or let's go to communist Russia, or, you know, North Korea. I mean, it's
a punch in the gut. If you really think about it, we haven't even started sports and they're already taking things away. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's like, it'd be one thing if we were in the middle of a season and there was this massive, you know, onset of COVID with our youth, and there needed to be some things that needed to be addressed. But the problem is that we haven't even started high school sports and they're already mandating that you can't do other things. And the problem, here's where the problem lies. And let's just be honest about it and why it is the way it is. Today, travel sports are dominant with our youth because that's the only thing that they have. So that there's travel football teams, there's travel baseball, volleyball, soccer, you name it, there's travel that, or AAU, whatever you want to call it, pay for play, all of that type of stuff. In my opinion, the powers that be start to see the handwriting on the wall. And if you don't limit that exposure, you're going to lose a lot. There's been multiple writers, Eric Sodenheimer out of LA, Joe Davidson out of Sacramento, that write on this. It's because they're assigned to high school athletics. And so they're addressing it. And a lot of support comes from that media to the CIF, and my perspective is well, sure, that's how you get paid, so if that kind of falls apart and, and high school athletics begin to fall apart, and go a different way, here's there's some really good things to separating sports from high school, but there's also the financial expectation. And so that's where it becomes, because you have kids that, if they're not the best players are always going to get paid, get their way paid. I mean, we all know that. I mean, you have a travel team and Johnny's, the 4-hitter and he pitches on the championship game. Kid's probably not going to pay if he doesn't have the ability to pay. Yeah. We've seen it. You and I have been absolutely. Yeah. But, what about Stevie that, is average at best, and he's comes off the bench or whatever it may, or maybe even he's a starter, but he's just not as playing important of a role, and now he can't afford it. Now, how does that kid, have the ability to play? So that's where the negative of it comes in. The positive of it comes in is less restriction, and you get more opportunity because, and maybe there becomes this recreational aspect with at the high school level, and it becomes an advanced travel becomes more advanced. And that's kind of where baseball lies now. If you really watch Little League and the Little League World Series, and any Little League you go to now is nothing like it used to be 20 years ago. Membership's down, talent's diluted. Some areas still value it, and so they've still put solid teams out. But California has thousands of travel baseball teams, and most of their travel teams don't allow them to play Little League. Yeah. So it's not to get off. I don't want to get off topic too much, but that's where the problem lies with limiting kids opportunities. Is you're going to have a problem long term because you're basically making them choose, and so. And again, I don't know how you limit that. How do you, if you can't play football and baseball, but you're allowed to play football and be in drama. They're two different cohorts. So how are you gonna restrict that? Who's policing this? Yeah,
do they
have the other part?
Is there is the Gestapo running around these neighborhood schools and local schools and pursuing it? But speaking of discipline and how they want to approach this. And this is, I'm going to read an excerpt from an additional CIF memo that came out on the 19th of January, just the other day, on the mandatory compliance with CIF bylaws and CDPH guidance. And this is to me is funny. So it's to CIF member schools. Okay. What schools in the state of California are not CIF member schools?
The ones that don't pay their dues.
Yeah, but here's the thing is that this memo that they're sending out here in 2021, I'm going to tell you, I'm hoping that the schools, well, I shouldn't say hoping that the schools, but I'm hoping that the student athletes and the local communities rise up and say, we're not going to take this anymore. Kind of like that old, was it Quiet Riot back in the 80s?
We're not going to take
it anymore. And decide that, the CIF and the state of California do not always make the decisions that are best for our kids. That's why we're parents and I'm not saying that all parents are perfect, but it is a parent's right to make decisions for their kids. But I digress. So, an excerpt from this memo, and it says, the vast majority of our member schools have complied with the state's orders pertaining to high school sports. However, the CIF has recently become aware that several member schools have competed in interscholastic contests in contravention of the guidance of the CDPH and the CIF rules. Any school determined to have participated in or to be conducting interscholastic athletic events in violation of the state's orders or CIF rules may be subject to CIF Article 22 sanctions, including but not limited to fines, suspension, or dismissal from membership. So the CIF, who touts themselves as a supporting organization of high school sports, is basically what they've done here is that they've threatened everyone in the state of California in this memo. And this is the way I read it. Some people may argue with me, and I've had people have conversations as a result of our podcast that don't agree with what I have to say, and that's fine. You're welcome to your opinion, but this is just another example of CIF's overreach. And in my opinion, they should be more afraid of losing memberships, losing their funding, and eventually going away. Because I think there's conversations even at the next level. I think the NCAA is having backdoor meetings as a contingency of, well, what happens if we lose all of the SEC members from the NCAA and they decide that the SEC can govern themselves and do all that? That would be a major hit for the NCAA.
Well, and so that last memo that you read it's in reference to, so last Friday, 4 Orange County private school teams played each other. 2 games, 4 schools. And again, you go through the media. I mean, and for anybody who really wants to, a lot of this is just overkill information, but I retweet a lot of stuff on our 209 Twitter account. So our Twitter account's at prep 209 at 209 prep. I'm sorry. So at 209 prep, and I retweet a lot of this stuff. But basically, what happened is those schools decided to play as outliers. They just said, you know what, we're just going to do it. And we've all seen some of the video and media coming out of Orange County with all the pushback and people just kind of frustrated with where things stand and everything else. So those schools played, and there was immediately the beat writers in LA, they're going to get shut down. They're going to get sanctioned. They're not going to be a part of the CIF anymore. They're going to do this. You know what happened? Not a damn thing. They didn't do anything to them. They basically said, don't ever do it again. And so that was the gist of how everything went down. And then they released a statement. So here's the reality. So say, and it will never happen, but just say our school decided to play outside. So do we get the mulligan? Do we do we get to play and then just get the slap on the wrist and say don't do it again?
Hey, yeah, Howard, I think that's an indication of how little power they actually have.
Oh, sure.
I think they flex their muscles and talk a big game, but to me, what are you going to do? Kick my school out of the CIF state championships? Well, newsflash, you canceled those, so we don't have to worry about it.
Well, and the crazy part about this whole thing is, and you and I have talked about this a lot, there was probably a day and time that the CIF was needed, and not needed in a way that was needed in a way that it made things easier and better. I mean, you basically created leagues, you created section championships, you created state championships. All of that structure is in place now. Mm-hmm. And not in a good way. It's not, I don't think most schools would agree with the way things go down. There was a time that, and again, I can only speak to us because of Linden, but we had 600 kids in our school, and 2 of the schools in our league had over 1,100 kids in their school. Mm-hmm. That's not even close to competitive. Right. And so we have 100 kids walking the campus that, are physically able to or want to play sports. And they have 300, mm-hmm. And so it's not equitable. And so now you have the CIF, and there's these arguments being made that, the CIF went out above and beyond. And I'm not going to sit here and beat up the CIF because I do believe that there was some intent.
Leave that to me.
I do believe that there was intent to do the right thing, but I do think that there was not enough planning done to have whatever it was, 37 schools, I think it was, that actually played sports or played football, 34 schools that played football this fall. They planned. You had from March 10th mm-hmm. until August 8th or whatever it was to put a plan together. And they did nothing. Mm-hmm. They didn't meet with, whether they met with the state or didn't meet with the state. I don't know what was going on, but for that to not happen, and how do 34, so we're so behind the times that California can't work with the CIF to make sure that we're able to, because here's the reality, guys. They're now asking us to get back into a tier that we were already in August. So now they're saying, hey, if you do what you've already done and you would have already got your season in, you get to play.
Yeah,
Here's your reward.
It's completely ridiculous. And that's why, it's like any employer. If you repeatedly make mistakes on your job, there's going to be ramifications of it. The CIF continues to make mistakes. It's like, I almost feel like they're sitting here, we're only going to do what the state tells us to do. Well, there's more to it than that. The state's going to have these guidelines, sure, but the CIF needs to be poised and ready on a dime to make decisions for the student athletes. That's why they exist.
Well, why wouldn't a proposal be taken to the state of California? And maybe it was, but here's the problem. When there's no transparency, there's only assumptions. And so when you don't come out and say, this is what we've done, and why would you not come out and say, this is what we've done? We've tried. Oh yeah, we're doing. Well, the reality of it is I guarantee you in Texas and Georgia and Florida and everywhere else that played, their governing bodies or whatever, sanctioning bodies decided to take the bull by the horns and get it done. Yeah, and because it was important.
For sure.
And I just don't think we put enough relevance on high school athletics. I mean, I don't think we understand and you see it, and we have a very diverse but very polarizing state where you have people on one side or the other. There's not a lot of middle ground fence walkers. It's either you believe this or you don't, and that's probably part of the problem. But the reality of it is where we stand today and what we're being asked to do, we've already been there. And that's the sad part, because we would have already finished our volleyball, our football, our cross country, and started the other sports.
Absolutely. Which brings us to kind of the last document that we're going to focus on today. And this is a letter penned by and help me out here, I believe it's the Let Them Play California Coalition.
So Let Them Play and the Golden State High School football coaches community have have joined forces to try to get this to happen.
Okay. So basically they put together a letter and it says that, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want to highlight a couple of things in here, but they really outline some of the things that we've already talked about. One excerpt here. Collectively, the following 4 categories of data present compelling reasons to detach youth sports from the current colored tiered system. Data from 40 plus states that have permitted youth sports, California high school football workout data, youth mental health data, and data collected during the socioeconomic disparity for the less fortunate inner city youth. So we've already, the first 2 things, the data from other states, we've kind of hit upon that already. The workout data, that was the first thing that we talked about and broke that down. But I think I want to actually read their statement on the mental health impact on children. And even though we hit upon that, I think this deserves to be said. So the mental health impact on children. The ban on youth sports competition is currently creating an alarming negative mental health impact in the areas of suicide, ideation, anxiety, depression, and suicide itself. More than 3 million children in California, ranging from t-ball to youth soccer to all high school sports, have been benched since March of 2020. The current sports colored tiered system will be unattainable for most sports in the time frame for the 2021 season. There are already extensive mental health repercussions from the lack of youth sports, and the current mental health crisis will get exponentially worse as the year goes on. Absolutely, it will. The fourth bullet point that they go into detail on is the impact on low-income children. And Chris, you hit on this a little bit previously. The most alarming outcome from your ban on youth sports is its devastating impact in our California inner cities. Inner city coaches report a sharp rise in gang membership, drug and alcohol use, school dropouts, and incarceration. Coaches attribute these behaviors to student athletes lacking direction and a team identity that previously brought discipline, accountability, and hope to their lives. Several of our school districts have not allowed their student athletes to participate in socially distanced workouts, while the more affluent school districts allow these workouts. The unfortunate reality is that while some of the inner city youth turn to gangs and violence, the more affluent families engage in school COVID workouts and participate in youth sports club teams that travel out of the county and out of the state for some competitive games. The current moratorium on California youth sports creates an alarming social equity disparity that is very transparent. And I believe this. I think they're hitting it on the head. And not everybody's in a socioeconomic kind of threshold, if you will, where they can do things that others can't. And that's where I think the public school system providing sports was a good thing, because it's not a pay to play. Everybody has the opportunity to try out or make a team or whatever, maybe find something that they love. And this, again, I say this, what we talk about is geared towards athletics, but you take this and put it towards, the drama club, the band, any of the extracurricular activities, and it's the same story. It's the same thing.
Well, the girl that gave, what was the young girl that gave the speech yesterday in the inauguration? She was definitively a part of some club growing up that helped her with learning, how to write poetry, or at least extending her love for poetry. And,
sure.
She did a phenomenal job. But it's the reality of where we stand today is that it's not equitable. You have so many, I think my biggest problem with this whole thing is it's all scientifically and data driven. Well, we have 34 states that have data. We're not even, here's the reality. We're not even asking anybody to do something that somebody else hasn't done. We're not asking you to be the first person to walk on the moon.
Right.
And I saw something today. So as coaches, we have a responsibility to educate ourselves in a multitude of areas that have almost nothing to do with the sport we coach. I mean, from CPR to how to deal with, certain gender-specific issue. Just a bunch of, USA Football and a couple of other alliances have classes that we have to take to get certified. Mm-hmm. Well, now there's a certification for dealing with COVID in athletics.
Right.
And so, and you get certified to do it. I mean, it'd be no different. So you're telling me I'm qualified enough to coach kids, and if that kid were to go to a cardiac episode, that I have some ability to at least maintain that child until help came.
Right.
But I don't have the ability to keep kids from giving COVID or, spreading COVID to each other.
Sure.
I mean, it's like we're working in this antiquated, archaic view of how life used to be. Instead of, we're in 2021. Mm-hmm. We have, last night I was like, man, my sinuses get really bad at night. Why? I Google it. I mean, you can start figuring out how.
If only there was a handheld device where we could get information immediately. But
it's nutty to me that we're in the day and time that we are with the information that we have, and we're treating people like they're ignorant, like they don't have the ability to make solid decisions, and that they won't make the right decision.
Yeah.
That's the sad. And here's the other part about, we talk about vaccinated, the elderly won't get. Why can't we get the flu vaccine distributed to millions among millions of people? Mm-hmm. Why are we reinventing the wheel? Why aren't the people who are giving the flu vaccine allowed to give the COVID vaccine?
Well, here's something that maybe I'm calling out this organization, maybe I'm not, but we pay an awful lot of money in taxes, and one of the organizations that we fund in our taxes is the OES, and we have a statewide OES, and each individual county has their own OES office. This is the exact thing that we pay them to be prepared for, and they're not prepared for.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry. It's like, I know there's a lot going on. You got to be prepared for floods or earthquake, natural disasters. Well, how long has the OES been able to prepare for this? And we're not, as a state, we're not employing that. It's like, and I don't know if that's the issue, but to me, as a resident of the state of California in the county in which I live in, that's where I'm pointing my finger first to organize an event that has to do directly with a pandemic or natural disaster or any of the above. Yeah. And if they're not reacting,
well, think about how bad FEMA got beat up with in New Orleans, or when we had the hurricanes.
What do we
and Puerto Rico?
Why are you not prepared for it? So,
and we're off the beaten path a little bit, but This information, there's so much out there now, and if you are listening to the podcast, you care, you have a vested interest, so if you want more information, I'm telling you, I mean, there's Twitter is providing as much information as you can possibly need and then some. So on Twitter, you can reach us at 209prep. Facebook, not so much, but you can also follow us on Facebook at 209prep sports, and then email us with any questions you have at prepsports209@yahoo.com. That's again, prepsports209@yahoo.com. As we wrap this up, Scott, what do you think? I mean, in your estimation, and neither one of us are in the know, but do you, with knowing the tiered system that you and I have talked about in the past and kind of seeing the way things are going numbers wise, do you anticipate us having sports this year? And this is just your opinion. You don't know anything.
Again, this is just, my opinion. I hate to say this. I'm going to be, as candid as I can. Just from what I've seen so far and the way that they've handled the situation, I don't think we will. I hope I'm wrong. I'll be the first one to stand up and say I was wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. But it breaks my heart to say that I just don't think that's going to be the case.
Well, and I think both of us, and I'm not sure. I'm not going to not go out on a limb. I hope that we do, and I believe that there's an opportunity for us to. But I think that the problem lies with how the schools are going to come. Are they going to really allow you to play sports if they're not back in person in the classroom?
Right.
I mean, if that happens, then we play.
Yeah.
But the most of the large school districts are not going back to school in 21. So they're not going to go back till the fall of 21 for the 21-22 school year. And so the rule has always been in the past, you have to go to school to play sports. If the CIF comes out, or if all the and schools are, I'm telling you right now, if the CIF just walks and says we're not going to play football or basketball or volleyball, high schools are still going to play. They're going to play outside the CIF. They're going to play within the tier rules, because the reality of it is there's no time frame for most schools. Most schools don't really care if they start in April or May or whatever. I mean, now they can't really start in May or June and then play a season in July or August, because you got to give some time for the body to recover. And I heard an argument the other day. Well, what happens if Johnny goes out and he tears his ACL in the spring and then misses his senior year too? That could happen. We could, my office is right here on a highway. I mean, you and I walk across and get a drink, get dumped nearly daily. We could get hit by a truck walking across the street. Are we not going to go get a drink because we're worried about getting hurt?
I think it's weird, because I think some of those vehicles are aiming for me. But
well, they're not. I've told you this before. They're not going to hit my big butt. So
yeah. Hey, I just want to hit upon kind of the last thing I want to say for today. That in another excerpt from this letter that was penned to the governor by the coalition. And they're making reference, I'll read it after I get done here, but they're making reference to a statement that he made and trying to hold him to it. And I think I'm so glad they put this in here. I think it pretty much sums up everything. So again, this is an excerpt from the letter that I was referencing before. And this is geared towards the state of California. And it basically says, California's children are an essential business. Therefore, it is essential that you let them play. During a recent podcast, you stated, and again, this is directed at the governor of California, you stated that sports shaped me. I love sports. I just don't like sports. I love sports. It's the reason we are having this conversation. It's the reason why I'm the governor of California. As a person who loves sports, let us unite for our youth. We're still waiting for the governor to let us unite for our youth.
Yeah, I believe that he played baseball at Santa Clara on scholarship, and that's where he got his education. I believe. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I would like to give credit where credit's due. You have Patrick Walsh is the head coach at Sarah High, and he was one of the main ones that formed this coalition. But this letter was signed by Ron Gladnick from Torrey Pines, Joe Bates from Skyline, Edward Washington at Castlemont, Jason Grant at Jefferson High in Louisiana, George Jackson at Richmond High, and Justin Almbaugh from De La Salle. And these people have all taken the initiative and taken it upon themselves to put their reputations on the line to get our kids back in. So again, if you follow us at 209 Prep on Twitter, I retweet a ton of this stuff. So it'll make it easier, and then you can just start following those people that have all the information. Again, Eric Sodenheimer gets a ton of information out of Southern California, and Joe Davidson's out of Sacramento. But there's a lot out there, guys. I mean, and we, Scott and I have really, we started this with the intent of really covering, high school sports and the beauty of high school sports and the successes that, our children are having. And it's evolved into the, well, we started it during probably the worst time ever. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
Just a mental note. If you're planning on starting a high school sports podcast, don't start it during a pandemic that shuts down high school sports.
Just so everybody knows, our second podcast was going to be Small Businesses in California podcast, and the pandemic came, so we decided to shut that one down.
Yeah.
But
so starting next year, we're going to start with the pandemic podcast discussing all things pandemic.
And not to joke about it, but what you can't make light of, you're gonna wallow in your own misery. So we appreciate everybody following and listening. There's a ton of information that we've brought about today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll share everything that I've got with anybody. I don't have a problem with that. And this isn't any hidden data. We didn't create any of this. This isn't even our own reporting. We're just sharing what we've already found. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe. Talk to you next week.